And welcome everyone to Judges Training. And our presenter today is John Labby. He runs a small business training works and has worked in the fields of adult education and training since 1980. And he's actually come to UL and helped us in our training, so I can verify that he's excellent. John has been a member of Toastmasters since 2004 and now belongs to two clubs, Toastmasters Plus and Toastmasters on Purpose, the advanced club in the Northwest Division. They both meet in Palatine. This year he served as the Northwest Division Governor and is looking forward to becoming the Toastmasters civilian again in 2 weeks. Yeah, he thinks that's what's going to happen. I have a feeling he's been voluntold that there are some projects that desperately need his attention. John is currently writing a book that he hopes to publish later this summer. It will be called Random Wisdom for Speakers, Teachers, and Trainers. And I personally can hardly wait till it comes out. This afternoon, John will be training Toastmasters contest judges. So if you're here for a lecture on the sex life of the duck-billed platypus, you're in the wrong place. It's my pleasure to introduce John Labby.
Thank you very much, Virginia. I couldn't have written that better myself. Question?
For the evaluation forms, how do you spell your last name?
L-A-B-B-E.
L-A-V-V-E?
Two B's and boy.
B-B. Okay, boy. Thank you.
Lima, apple, baby, elephant. All right. Our purpose this afternoon is to do these few things. We are going to discuss the contest judge's role. We're going to do some background work on contests and judging. We're going to focus a little bit on how to fill out the judge's ballot. We're going to prepare for a few possible surprises. And we are not, for the love of all that is holy, talk about how to run a good contest. Or to talk about contests in general. We have a very limited amount of time. And I'll say it right now, if we get questions about the duties of the contest chair, I'm just not going to answer. We're here to focus on being a judge. The district wants us all who will be judging in contests to have had judges training. So that's going to be our primary objective this afternoon. All right, I'm going to blast through the first half dozen slides in this prepared program because I want to devote as much time as possible to studying the judging criteria on the judging form. So, oh, yeah, okay. Of course, let's give this some time. Because I really don't want to reboot in front of you in the middle of this presentation. All right, so the first thing is that there are some eligibility rules. Does everybody have a handout at this point? Okay. I have included on the handout most of the absolutely key factors from our presentation. Take some notes on there if you like, but what you already have is the essential information that TLI wants you to have. My role is to give you an experience that will help you become a better judge. So yes, there are some eligibility factors. You have them in writing. The key one here is that in order to judge any contest now, you must have completed 6 CC speeches at least once.
In contest?
Not in contest, but
I mean, any contest? Is that
in order to judge at an area contest or higher,
thank you. Okay.
You must meet these criteria. All right. Good judges have certain characteristics. They're accurate, fair, trustworthy, loyal, friendship, All the rest of the Boy Scouts. Loyal, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. All those things, right? And knowledgeable. It really does help to know what you're doing in order to judge how well somebody did a speech. And then finally, it really does also pay to be a good listener. Now, there are some barriers to being an effective judge that we ought to talk about, at least briefly. Speaker position, and I'm going to refer to TI's notes on this, just so that I don't get goofed up on which is which, because as you'll see there's a little bit of overlap. Sometimes when you hear 5 or 6 or sometimes even 7 speeches, it's a little easier to remember the last couple of speeches than it is the ones that came first. Or sometimes you might find yourself remembering the first speech or two pretty well and the last speech or two pretty well, but not those poor rascals who happen to draw slots 3, 4, and 5. Okay? So it's really important to do something systematic to keep that from happening to you. So you take your notes after each speech. The practice in our district is to allow the judges a minute of quiet time after each speaker to take notes, complete your judge's form, the ballot, and then prepare your mind to listen to someone new. It's really wise to use that time. All right, sometimes we find ourselves wanting somebody to do well. Maybe it's someone who has competed half a dozen times in the past, and you know this, and you know they work really hard, and subconsciously you start giving them a few extra points here and there just because you want them to win. And as human as that is, it also means you're not really doing a great job as a judge, so that's something to avoid. Now, there's also the opposite problem, and that is when you know somebody has terrific characteristics in some other area, right? They're a great club president, or you know they're a very effective evaluator, but now here they are in the humorous speech contest, and you subconsciously start to give them credit on this performance for things that they have done in the past. And again, it's only human to be thinking along these lines, but it's something to be aware of that you might be doing. So anytime you're faced with, say, somebody who has been very active in the district, maybe somebody who a year or two ago was an area governor and was very well known, or something along those lines, be aware of the possibility that you might be subconsciously giving that person a little more credit than this particular performance during this particular contest is worth. And then, of course, the reverse halo effect, which is to punish people for whom you might otherwise give them a little extra credit. So we certainly don't want to do that either. And then there's the second time around problem, which is somebody gave this speech last year and they finished second, and they're going to try it again. And you think, you find yourself supporting this person, wanting them to do well. And that's if there's a single fault that it's possible to have as a judge, it is the wanting someone to do well. Because that's not really our job. They've got an audience, right? Let the audience and their club members and their friends and their grandmother want them to do well. Our job is to find out if they really did. And then finally, not the norm. For example, in some districts, it might be the norm for speakers to stay at the lectern, much like a politician often will do. But in other districts, speakers are encouraged to use the entire speaking area. Well, if you had this bias that staying behind the lectern is the right thing to do, you'd find yourself punishing speakers who behave differently during the contest. Your norm might not necessarily be appropriate to the circumstance. So be aware of, and dress is another. I know of people who feel that they lost in a contest because they weren't wearing a suit. I'm talking men because that's a differential factor for them. I have seen people wear anything and everything to speak at a contest. And I don't know anywhere on the judge's form where it talks about dress code. Now, there is one for appearance. There is a line for appearance in the form, but that refers to things like attentiveness, appearance, where'd it go? Appropriateness, anyway. Oh, it's under physical, right? Appearance, body language, speaking area. So there is a place, if you feel someone is truly dressed in a truly inappropriate way, there is a place for this on the judging form for at least a few of the contests. But it's 2 points. It's 3 points. Sure, ding them for those if somebody shows up wearing shorts and they're giving the international speech contest and shorts is not germane to what they're doing. Sure, ding them a couple of points if they're truly inappropriately dressed. But otherwise, stick to the criteria on the form. And then finally, prejudices, personal preferences. This can go anywhere. If you don't like, I've heard people say that they don't think that a speech in the international speech contest should be funny. We shouldn't be using humorous speeches in the international speech contest. I have news for you. 3 out of the 10 international speech world champions during the decade of the 2000s gave funny speeches to win the World Championship of Public Speaking. So let's not talk about that as being a requirement. It is a personal preference, and one ought not to inflict their personal preference as a judge. All right. So you need to know the rules of the competition. You want to prevent misconceptions about the rules. So here's what's going to happen in a contest, just so we're all prepared. So the first contestant is going to speak. You'll get a minute to mark your ballots. Rinse, lather, and repeat, right, for each contestant. And then after the last contestant, you will have as much time as you need to complete your ballot, score everybody, and mark your ballot with your choice for first, second, and third place. You'll have plenty of time. And by the way, you also need to sign your ballot. We're going to spend a few minutes, in a couple of minutes, on a few things that you can do wrong on the ballot, and we'll get to that then. So then you tear the bottom off the ballot, and the ballot counters will circulate around, and they will collect your ballots. The ideal is that judges are anonymous. The reality is that most of us work in contests where there are maybe 20 or 30 people in the audience, a third of whom are judges. So the likelihood of your identity being truly anonymous, pretty low. On the other hand, you don't have to go waving your ballot like this. The ballot collectors will find you. All right, let's keep blasting here. All right, so this is a little bit hard to see, but I'll tell you what, let's pass these handouts around. In fact, I'll start a few over on the other side. This is the front side, behind you, and then the back side. I printed them out separately because I want you, in an exercise that we're going to do, to be working with the 2 pages separately. So there's the ballot. Now, key thing to bear in mind, you're going to want to take notes. What I like to do is to put the speaker's title somewhere on that ballot. So speaker number 1 is Bill Jones. I'll put a key word or two from the title so that at the end, even if I've already done all my scoring, if I find that I have something very close to a tie, I'm going to need something to remind me who did what during this contest so that I can distinguish between the 88 points that I gave speaker number 2 and the 89 points that I gave speaker number 5. In my mind, those are a tie, and I need to determine which one truly was stronger. Anything within a couple of 3 points in my mind is a tie, and I need to resolve that. So some notes, even brief ones, will help you with that. The top of the ballot contains a system of suggested points. You don't have to do this, but it is by all means the easiest and simplest way to judge systematically. And systematicity is what will help us be objective. Now, you can use other point values. I have seen people do, just a 1 through 10 for all of the criteria. I've seen people just do a couple of plus signs or a couple of minus signs. As long as you're systematic and you don't change your own rules halfway through, it's fine. You don't ever turn that part of your ballot in anyway. You could draw cartoons while they're speaking and vote for the one who inspired the best cartoon. Probably not doing your job really well, but theoretically that could work. Yes, ma'am?
I'm taking notes. Do we bring additional paper, or are we just?
You may bring a bushel of paper.
Okay.
Absolutely. The only thing is you would take those, if you do take notes on additional paper, take them away from the contest room so that, and throw them away at home, rather than toss them in a trash can there at the site, because who knows? Some contestant might get curious and say, oh, I wonder what Sally thought of my speech. And I don't think either one of you really wants to know where that could lead. And like I say, some pluses or minuses as a way of distinguishing between the quality of the speakers is another system. So, notice on the ballot, and I've given you the humorous speech ballot, which is a fall contest. These examples, I believe, are from the international, the examples that are on the slide. Notice that there are three, let's go back. 3 large sections. Can I just see one of these right from you? Thank you. So you notice you have a section for content, a section for delivery, and a section for language. And then within each, you have some subsets. And within each of those subsets, you have additional subset criteria. We're going to look at those in a little more closely here in just a little bit. So, you're looking at each presentation, each speech, for 3 things. You're looking at content, you're looking at delivery, and the use of language. So in content, we're looking at speech development, speech effectiveness, and the speech value. Now, the ballot for the international speech says that under development, you should be looking at structure, organization, and support material. What do we get for humorous? Is it about the same?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right? Okay. So, what really matters is paying attention to those sub-points. If you're going to be truly systematic and truly use this judging form, we want to be able to look into each of those criteria. And Virginia just pointed out that on the humorous ballot, there is also an area for audience response, because after all, if someone is giving a humorous speech and instead it looks like they just delivered a eulogy, maybe it wasn't very effective. All right. So delivery, there's physical, there's the voice, and there's manner. we're going to blast through here a little bit because you're going to have lots of time, or some time anyway, to look into these a little bit more deeply. Under language, we're looking at the appropriateness of the language, the correctness of the language. So if someone is using words or phrases that you think are inappropriate for the kind of audience, that's an area where you could ding them. If they're using language incorrectly, this is where you would evaluate the degree to which their language use was correct. And if you felt that there were some areas where this person did not use the language correctly, ding them a point or two. But you don't want to be dinging someone whose language is a little weak for 40 or 50% of the value of the ballot. Be aware of where on the ballot you ding people for certain weaknesses and in what proportion TI suggests that these elements of the speech are worth. All right, so we're going to complete this ballot. I hope that this is pretty legible. As you see here, we have had a humorous speech contest, and there have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 contestants, right? And I'm not sure how large this is. So our total scores going across the bottom are 90, 53, 66, 90, and 92. All right, so everything looks good, right? Anybody see a potential problem?
Didn't sign the ballot.
All right, I heard didn't sign the ballot, and I heard that there's a tie. Now, what happens if you see a tie in your own math as a judge?
You have to choose who's higher. And
Yes, it's your role to resolve your own ties.
that's where your notes come in.
That's where your notes come in. Remember I was talking about earlier how in my view an 88 and if I give somebody an 88 and 3 speakers later gets an 89, that's a tie. And I need to look carefully at what I remember about their speeches and decide which one of them was truly better than the other. So we have an unsigned ballot and we have a tie. And I'm here to tell you that I have experienced both of those in the same contest from the same judge.
Okay.
This, except for the names of the contestants, this was a real ballot. All right, so,
Question.
yes, Dennis.
Then, along with that same thing, you refer back to notes. How do you, any suggestions from your experience on weighting? How, because you're going back, you've got 2 people with 90, and you're obviously going to have to give some credit or some balance to that 90 versus the other 90. Any suggestions on how you do that, where you feel like?
You only have I mean, you have an unlimited amount of time theoretically, but you really don't, right? We all know that eventually somebody's going to start hammering on the judges, and I've been the guy with the last ballot. I know what that feels like. I think what I would probably do is I would go back and just try to think of the speech as a whole. Did it move me more than the other speech? Was it funnier than the other speech? Depending on the contest.
Because it's hard to go back then and
Yes, it
evaluate
is.
each of those criteria because you may assign a little different weighting and you want to bias that. So.
Right, right. But when 2 people are that close, I'm usually thinking more in terms of what was the big picture like.
Good. So thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Was not really a ballot problem, but when you were mentioned about certain clubs, like you would stay behind the lecture.
Right.
So how would you fix that? Would you go by the club who's residing in the contest, or because what if they decide what if they want you to stay behind the lecture? What if that's their club rule or policy, where you have other clubs coming in and saying no, that's not what we do? How would you resolve that? Would you go by the club as?
Here's the thing: in a contest, if it were a club contest, it wouldn't matter because everybody would be using the same basic approach.
Okay.
But in an area contest or higher, my point was simply to be aware that there are different ways of doing things, and to try not to put a personal preference ahead of the actual skill being demonstrated.
Okay.
Another question before we proceed? Yes?
On that whole point of breaking the tie, that's why I like to put down the speech title, because
Yes.
if I can't remember the names, and I do have they're both at 90, then I can say, oh, I remember the speech because of the title, and then you can kind of
Yes.
bring back along
Right,
with your
those
notes.
notes are really useful for that. Absolutely. All right, so we have the problem with the tie. We have an unsigned ballot, so that's kind of an issue. Now, you may be asked to be a tie-breaking judge. A couple of differences in the tiebreaker. The tie-breaking judge, first off, does not participate in the judge's briefing. The identity of the tie-breaking judge really is supposed to be kept anonymous. And typically, the contest chair will collect the tie-breaking judge's ballot and keep it separate in the event that it be needed. Now, here's the crucial difference that you need to know. And that is that if you are the tie-breaking judge, instead of picking first, second, and third, which you do as a regular judge, the tie-breaking judge ranks all competitors. And that's because if there is a tie determined by the ballot counters, then the role of the tie-breaking judge's ballot is to determine which of those two appeared higher on the tie-breaking judge's ballot. So you have to list everybody in sequence, otherwise your ballot won't be useful at all, or might not be useful in breaking a tie if you listed only your top three and not, say, the other 2 or 3 or 4 competitors.
So does that mean, I'm trying to play that out, you have 5 in this case, and supposedly there's a tie at the second. Everybody's
Right.
consistent on who the winner is,
Right.
but the second place is, so that
Right.
tie-breaking judge
Exactly.
has to evaluate 1 through
Right.
5. to
Exactly,
assign
because
it.
it could well be that the 2 people who tied for second, according to all of the other judges, ranked 4th and 5th on the tiebreaker's ballot.
Okay.
But in that case, the one who the tie-breaking judge picked 4th would break the tie, and then the other one would finish in the place below that.
Okay,
So
thank
it's
you.
absolutely important that you remember to rank all of the contestants. All right. The other thing that can come up is a protest. Now, only 2 things can be protested in a Toastmasters contest. One is eligibility, and the other is originality. We're going to take a couple of minutes to talk about originality. Eligibility should have been determined before the contest. And unless you happen to know something really unique, unless you happen to have very unique knowledge of the contestants, it's pretty unlikely that you as a judge would be able to protest, in a position to protest eligibility. However, you may find yourself in a position to protest on originality. So let's talk about what originality is. So there are key point, only judges and contestants may enter a protest, and the contest chair will rule on eligibility. But if there is an originality protest, what will happen is that the judges will meet and they will call the affected contestant to meet with them, and the contestant will have an opportunity to defend the originality of his or her work. That's what actually happens. And then the majority of the judges have to concur in order to disqualify somebody on the basis of originality. Now, and then all the decisions are final. So what is originality? Here's what TI says. 25% or less of the speech may be devoted to quoting, paraphrasing, or referencing another person's content. Any quoted, paraphrased, or referenced content must be so identified during the speech. So a couple of quick examples. If I open with a brief, famous quote, let's say, Someone bright once said, all men are created equal. And then I go on and talk for about 5 or 6 minutes about what it means, what this phrase means, all men are created equal. Is that original? What do you think? Is that a problem? That's original and it's not a problem?
Correct.
That's your consensus? Good. That's fine. All right. What if I recite some quotes for about 4 minutes and add about 3 minutes of my own comments? What do you think? Now, not original. All right? Multiple quotes, but with none of my own comments. Not original. All right. Now, here's where we're going to have some fun. We've got 15 minutes. So I'd like you to divide yourselves into smallish groups of, let's see the ballot again. Here. 1, 2, 3. Let's do a group, let's say along this line. I want you to look very carefully at just the criteria under content. Back line, let's look at the criteria under delivery. And then this line here, let's look at the criteria under language. And here's what we want you to do. I want you to look at the criteria, pay attention to the fact that on the back page, the second page that I gave you, is where the criteria are described in detail. And then I would like you to, as a group, come up with examples of what excellent and very good and only fair might look like. So the content group, if you would, for instance, just come up with what excellent and so on look like for structure, for speech development. Let's look at that one in some detail. So at the end of our activity time, we'd like somebody to teach the rest of us for just a minute or two what's the difference between excellent speech development and only very good speech development, and fair. And we'll do the same thing in the delivery group on, let's do voice. Flexibility and volume, just a couple of criteria, but help us to understand the difference between excellent and very good, and between very good and good, okay? And then this group here is going to be doing language, so let's work on appropriateness. That's the largest value under language. So what does excellent look like? What does very good look like? And so on. And let's see, I have that it's about 3:17, 3:18. We only have about 12 minutes, so I'd like to give you, let's say, about 6 minutes on this, so that we'll have some time to report back and discuss what these criteria are really all about. That you were looking at, and that was going to be which one? Speech development? Okay, tell us.
For speech development, it mainly looks for the framework of the speech. So we will look for 3 main points in there. That was the opening really engaging audience since beginning and keep that engagement throughout the speech. Second is how smooth and appropriate are the transitions, and is the closing impactful and tying the whole thing together. So if a person is doing all 3 things right, he's excellent. If the person missed one of these aspects, he is very good. If he's missing 2 of these, so like the opening was good but he missed at the transitions and the closing, then he is good. But if he missed on all 3 aspects completely, then I will just give him fair.
Thank you very much. Did you do a great job? All right, let us hear about delivery. Who's your spokesperson?
Right here, this lovely young lady.
All right. You can present from right back there if you'd like. It'll save us some time.
Okay.
Support me at this.
So for,
Okay.
for voice, we were talking about voice as the delivery aspect. So it says that it's the sound that carries the message. It should be flexible, moving from one pitch to another for emphasis. Should have a variety of rate and volume. Can be clearly heard and the words easily understood. So it's pretty easy to figure out what's excellent and what's fair, because fair would be somebody you can't understand them, there's no vocal variety, they're monotone, you can't hear them. Excellent would be there's a lot of vocal variety, they can switch in and out of other voices, you hear them, they speak clearly, you understand the words they're saying. And then in between, very good and good, are gradients in between, and we didn't quite come down to exactly what those were, but kind of in my mind I was thinking if you see opportunities where the person could have used some vocal variety or could have improved their voice, and they didn't take those opportunities, and if there's a few of those, then they're very good, and if there's a lot of those, they're only good.
Excellent, thank you very much. And finally, language.
Okay.
Aha.
For a group, we had a number of criteria. We did not, however, John ranked them as eloquently as the first group, but we talked about it has to be clear. So enunciation is an example. It has to be common language, and that includes also recognizing dialects or other words that might be used in phrases that were there. Proper pronunciation and accuracy. If you're going to quote something, you dang well better have that quote pronounced appropriately. And also proper sequencing. If you're telling something in an order, it makes sense that those things were appropriate from that standpoint. If you're identifying a list as an example, that makes sense, the order and sequence.
Great, thank you very much. All right, we are down to just a couple of minutes. So, I put this up, and honestly, I look at this slide and I can't remember whether this was my choice or Toastmasters, but I do like this, that it is choice that enables us to grow. And I want to congratulate you on making the choice to serve as contest judges, because I don't care whether you do it once, 5 times, or 20. Serving as a contest judge and really paying attention to the difference between an excellent speech and a very good speech will make you a better speaker. So thank you for the district because you are serving us, but thank you for yourselves because this is yet another way that you have chosen to grow.
Question here.
Now, we have maybe 2 minutes, which is an opportunity to cover a couple of questions or so, if we have any, do we? Yes?
This is for the fall contest. Now, TI in their wisdom puts out the new speech contest booklet January, February. So if we aren't chosen to be a judge this contest season, do we have to go through another training session for the spring, or is this for the whole 2013-2014 year?
This training, District 30 asks that you complete judges training in order to serve as a judge at the area contest level or higher. And they're setting an expiration date on your training of roughly 1 year. So training that happens, basically training that happens during or immediately, right now we're just a little bit ahead of the start of the next Toastmasters year. This training counts for all of next year. So once your names, and I hope that everyone has signed the sign-in sheet.
There are 2.
There should be 2. I have 1 here. There's the second one.
I didn't sign the one.
Would somebody please do me the favor of
You only have
doing?
to sign one.
You only have to sign 1 of the 2. But would you do me a favor? Would you do a head count and see if we have the same number of names here? All right. So training today will be good until the 2014-2015 season.
And another question about the eligibility form for judges, which is new this year.
Right. There is a new form which judges are asked to sign prior to a contest. Thanks for bringing that up. I forgot to bring that up. It's new this year, and it is basically you're signing that you will be an ethical judge and that you are eligible to serve as a judge. It's a signature thing that gets, turn it into the contest chair. Any other questions about serving as a judge? Thank you. Yes.
Does this training guarantee that we're gonna be asked to be judges? Is it an asking
I
or
would
is
say
it
the odds
voluntary?
of that are really, really high.
Yeah, because they actually, this will go into the system and they will create a report. So when the area governors and the division governors are getting ready to do their contest, they will be informed, they'll be able to check and see. Because if they wanted someone to be a judge and the person hasn't been to training, they can't be a judge for an area or division contest.
Right. And one of the eligibility factors is that you have judged at the level below. So I hope that you will all serve an opportunity to serve as a judge at the club level so that you can then judge at an area level. Because here's the challenge when you're organizing an area contest. Let's say you have 5 clubs in your area. You want to have a fair judges panel. To do that, ideally you would have one judge from each of those 5 clubs. And if you only have trained judges from 3 clubs, you don't have a fair panel. Because then there are 2 clubs that aren't balanced out. So it's really important that you make yourselves available to serve as judges now that you're trained. And I don't know how to say this any more powerfully, except to say that you will receive the thanks of a grateful district if you serve as a judge, because that is almost the hardest part of organizing an area contest, is getting together a fair panel of judges. And the more of us who are prepared to do so, the better. Thank you all very much. You were great.